Welcome to In 20XX. This series takes the listener, year by year, into the future. If you like emerging tech, ecotech, futurism, apocalyptic survival scenarios, and disruptive science, sit back and enjoy short stories that showcase my research into how the future may play out.
For the competition, each student completes a groundbreaking project. Winning projects include better cooling systems for spacecraft, software that can turn any mic into a video recorder of sorts, a procedure for exposing a mouse's brain to a low-footprint platform of sensors and testers, and a new nanomaterial that may be able to replace vocal cords. Of the roughly 300 kids at the school, 100 have won the competition and will go to camp in space. In the auditorium at Giantess Academy of Seminole Learning, those who didn't win gather to watch the streaming launches of 6 fusion rockets that'll take the winners to space. Lenny, a little embarrassed, sits in a row of seats. At age 17, he's one of the oldest kids at the school. Most go on to college when they're no older than 15 years old, the age he was when recruited into the school. And most of the winners for space camp are the oldest, so now he stands out as a lot older than all the other kids. In fact, he may be the oldest. On average, the oldest student here is 13. He sits by himself and overhears some girls talking. The first says, "There she is." The second says, "So it's true." The first says, "I wonder how she feels about it." They're talking about Grace Knotts, who first won Best Project above all the rest and then was denied her spot at space camp. Lenny sees her on the other side of the auditorium, sitting by herself. She appears to be talking to herself, but all kids have their personal companion AI, and she probably talks with hers. It's sad she couldn't go. Her Holograms-in-water project made world news. Companies want to make swimming pools that play holograms. Giantess plans on selling bottled water with holograms inside once they figure out how to shrink the tech and mass-produce it. She wanted to go, but she's known to freak out for unpredictable reasons, like throwing her lunch food down and screaming because one of her fries was broken. Plans were made to make space safe for her. Who's to say what happened with those plans? How does she feel about losing her spot? No one knows because it's so hard to have a normal conversation with her. She's 13, and people say she can do Knott's math in her head. Most math professors can't do Knott's math on paper. The screen is divided into 6 sections, and one of the rockets stands in each. A femme's voice says, "Oxidizer load is complete. Fuel load is complete. Confirming propellant levels on the ground control system. All readings are nominal." All 6 rockets fire off a burst of flame and smoke from their bases. The flames stop and the smoke clears. Children in the audience squeal and clap. The femme's voice says, "Engines are at operating temperature. Engines 1 through 6 are reading nominal. Pressure and temperature are within expected ranges. Avionics system check complete. All telemetry channels are clear. Guidance system is locked and calibrated. No anomalies detected." Lenny leans forward, taking in the details. 16 to 17 students sit aboard each of those rockets. The single stage is a new design, and those rockets are most likely going on their maiden voyages. The femme says, T-minus 20, 19, 18. The streams shake. More flames and smoke burst from underneath. Kids in the auditorium stop talking and gape at the screen. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we have liftoff. Did they have to launch all 6 rockets at the same time? No. But the world is watching. Thin and bony, Lenny sits in engineering class taking notes as Mr. Measure, an AI teacher, says, "In the 2030s, most buildings were 4 times heavier and twice as fragile as the buildings made today. The concrete spewed carbon into the atmosphere. Lumber had to be grown, which was costly. Metals such as iron and aluminum tied building costs to expensive mining operations. Today we use mycrete, self-weaving foam cable, and collagens." Octavia, Lenny's personal assistant and support companion, says, "Lenny, Miss Flecky is coming." Standing by his desk, she looks vaguely elfin and wears a modern take on medieval clothing. A video window opens showing the adult Hume, Miss Flecky. She says, "Lenny, pause your class and step out into the hall." Lenny taps a button on his desk. For him, Mr. Measure freezes. The other students continue listening and taking notes as Lenny steps out of the classroom. In the hall, she says, "Let's have a talk." She glances at her interactive sleeve and flicks away a notice on it. Her perm is bouncy, and she always wears fluffy blouses, but whenever he sees her face, she has a stern expression. He already has a pretty good idea what this is about. She holds up a scratched, tarnished loop, an old link anklet, and says, "Care to explain this?" He blushes. Not long ago, he was shorter than her, but now he stands a few centimeters taller. He says, I bought it in the rec zone on our last field trip. She says, "This is the third time we found you with an installed copy of Medusa. You must know security AI picked that up immediately." He shifts but stands his ground. She says, "There are reasons the school operates in a closed net. Medusa compromises the safety not only of the children, but of some of the most valuable technology that isn't ready to be used in the wider world." His stance is getting too stiff. He wants desperately to back up. She says, "If you're curious about Medusa, you can always join the White Hat Hackers Club. They leave the school premises and hold meetings about 1 kilometer from here in a tech tool library." He says, "They won't let me join." The corners of her lips curl when she smiles and dimples appear. She says, "They are a cliquey brood. I could dock their snack privileges until they become more inclusive." Alarms of all sorts go off. Weather horns outside wail. Hall alarms start. Woo-woo loops. A robot walking down the hall starts saying, "Weather alert!" IR windows pop up, both for Lenny and Miss Flecky. Octavia appears, jumps up and down and says, "Lenny, it's a weather alert. We need to go to the shelter lift." Alertness replaces her measured calm. She says, "Oh, Lenny, hurry to the cylinder. I don't think this is a drill." Moving from feeling intimidated to relieved to worried, Lenny jogs through the halls that fill with students coming out of classrooms and heading in the same direction. The cylinder is an elevator in the academy, which is part of the megastructure called Giantess HQ. The cylinder was made by a rocket company, and its carriage is shaped like a rocket tube. It contains 12 stories of rooms with seats. No matter where you are in the academy, it should take no longer than 10 minutes to make it to one of the rooms on one of the 12 floors and find a seat. If that floor is full, you can take a smaller elevator inside the cylinder to another floor. When not used as an elevator, the cylinder rooms are places to hold meetings or where students can do their classwork. Lenny enters on the 5th floor of the cylinder. The large room with a circular wall contains 40 seats. Octavia runs ahead of him and points out a seat he can take. She says, "It won't be as full as when we had a drill. So many kids went to space camp." He sits in the cushioned chair as children younger than him hurry in, interacting with their buddy AIs and taking seats. Some adults he doesn't recognize enter and take seats, looking scared. They probably work in research and development. When they do a drill, adults other than the 3 school guardians don't come. Should he be scared? Even in the closed environment, he's heard rumors of climate programs ending and what that could mean. The students don't look too worried. Most of them take the time out of class to play AR games or visit VR worlds. One man holds a large contraption on his lap. It looks like a space helmet, except it's all opaque. The man sitting next to him says, "What's that?" The first man shudders and says, "It's my Iron Maiden." The second says, "What?" The first says, "No, in case I die, this will slice and scan my brain. That way, when they figure out how to emulate brains, my digitized brain will be ready to go." The second man nods. "Oh, I heard about that. Is it very heavy?" The sliding doors close, and Lenny feels his stomach lift, then settle as the cylinder drops. The marvel of a 12-story elevator carrying over 200 people is hidden. No one can see the entire thing move. No one can see how far it drops. The lights dim briefly, and plates sliding against each other scrape above them and grows quieter as they drop. That would be the blast doors. A 9-year-old girl 2 seats away from him says, "Are you a new guardian?" He shakes his head and says, "No, I go to school here." She says, "I thought all the older kids went to space camp." He says, "No," and looks away, hoping she'll think of something else to pay attention to. Octavia, standing before him, rolls her eyes, shakes her head, and smiles. One of the adults, a man with a thick face but eyes like a cherub, frantically air taps and says, "Assist! Call Noreen! Call Noreen!" Should Lenny worry about his brother? Students can make calls to family after hearing a message listing what can and can't be discussed. All activities have color codes. Classic math classes are coded green. Projects involving underdeveloped tech are red-coded. Yellow and red-coded topics are off-limits when talking to family. If a student does bring one of those up, a voice will say, "This conversation must discontinue. Say goodbye to each other." Repeat offenders may lose phone privileges for a time. Lenny has tried to call his brother, but Vaughn is bad about picking up. Lenny feels a pulling downward as the cylinder stops. Doors on the north, south, east, and west of the room slide open. Octavia says, "Come on, let's go." She tilts her head and waves him forward, onward. Instead of heading to the cafeteria to have cake like they do for drills, Octavia leads him down a long hall, calling back to him, "I'll show you your room." His room? How long will they be here? He isn't wearing his favorite shoes. He doesn't have his PJs with him. What's he supposed to sleep in? Other kids walk or run walk as they follow their buddy AIs. Octavia stands in a doorway and points into the room. The narrow room contains 2 sets of bunk beds. She says, "Pick a bunk." He points at a top bunk. A screen on the wall next to that bed lights up with the same favorite pictures he has next to his usual bed. She says, "In 20 minutes, we'll have a meeting in the bunker auditorium. How do you feel about what's happening?" He says, "I don't know. I wish I could get back to class." Another student, Neil, arrives to share the room. He takes the other upper bunk bed. He's around 14 and the two don't interact much. They walk to the auditorium. Built to seat nearly 400, only about half the seats get filled. Most are 6 to 7 years old. Order is kept by companion AI. If someone talks too loud, their AI will say, "Shh, remember to use your inside voice." The kids do what the AI say because the AI are best buds, there for the kids in so many ways. The 12 adults, including the 3 guardians, sit together and show alarm whether they try to hide it or not. The children seem mostly fine. It's the adults who quiver and air tap frantically. School principal AI appears on the stage. Designed to cause children to behave, her bulletproof expression of absolute authority incites respectful caution. Her looks and personality have evolved by making adjustments and monitoring how kids react. She says, "Children, this isn't a drill. Everyone should stay calm. You are in a safe place and no harm will come to you. While we're here, I expect you to focus on your studies as much as you have before. We don't have access to our labs, build shops, staging rooms, and so on, but you can continue with your projects in virtual environments. Your school schedules will stay the same, and your buddy AIs will help you find your way to your new classrooms. If anyone has questions, now is the time to ask." Hands raise and Principal AI points. A girl in the front asks, "What's happening outside?" Principal AI says, "A storm has hit Pittsburgh." One of the adults, a man with flattened long hair, says, "It's not just Pittsburgh." 2 of the other adults place hands on him and shush him. He says, "They should know. Why can't they know?" Principal says, "Yes, the storm is passing over the East Coast." She points at a boy with his hand raised. The boy says, "How long will we be in the shelter?" The man says, "It doesn't matter." 2 of the other adults help him to his feet and lead him out of the auditorium. Principal says, "That depends on how long the storm lasts. Be patient. We have everything we need here." She points at a girl wearing welding goggles around her neck. The girl says, "But my robot is almost done. It's upstairs. How will I complete it?" Principal says, "We will all need to make do. One reason you all have found yourselves attending the school, picked out from millions, is your adaptability to unprecedented circumstances. This is a situation where you can show your classmates how well you adapt and thrive." She points to a boy with large ears. The boy says, "Can we wear our slick shoes in the halls?" Many laugh and look about. Principal says, "The same rules apply here as in the school above, in the gym and in the halls between classes." After that first day, the adults are nowhere to be seen. Before sheltering, at least one of the 3 guardians attended every lunch hour. Each day, Lenny was likely to see a guardian in one of the classrooms or talking with a student in a hallway. Lenny's excited to have the chance to do something he shouldn't, but he can't get to the rec zone or catch a train to a squatter neighborhood, so he still can't get a hold of some weed or sell a weapon or any of the side hustles he longs to do. Each morning, a robot brings his printed clothes for that day, tailor-fitted as all printed clothes are. He must use his AR glasses to attend VR learning environments and air tap a lot. The desks don't have hologram tops. The halls are narrower. The cafeteria food is repetitive and simpler, but it is fresh. He finds a Count the Days app and starts a count for this time underground. His classes go well. Before, he usually went into a rest pod during breaks to catch up with sleep or just chill and watch tubes. Now, when he has free time, he walks the halls, tries doors, and looks into rooms. He finds a game room with a bulletless target range, dartboards, running tracks, a pool table, and other recreational equipment. The place is empty and seems like a waste of space. Who these days would use all this stuff? Whoever designed this survival shelter had no clue that a game room would go unused. It feels sad and spooky even, a vacant game hall so deep underground. In an elevator, he stares at the buttons for 20 floors. Again, why install physical buttons? It makes the environment feel like a movie set. He pushes the button for the top floor. It takes him up and opens to a narrow hall. The walls are lined with what could be emergency suits or some kind of medical equipment. He doesn't know for sure. Though he feels he shouldn't, he walks down the hall. Somewhere ahead, adults argue. "Let me go, you can't detain me like this." Don't listen to him, he'd have killed us. Lenny's chest and face burn hot. He turns away from the shouting and hurries back. The next day, during morning break, he stops by his room. Neil is there, sitting on a lower bunk, air tapping. Lenny says, "What are you doing?" Neil says, "I'm trying to learn knots math." Lenny says, "Oh, that's hard. I've tried many times. There aren't any learning tools for that. We could practice together." Neil says, "Just ask your buddy AI to help you learn it." Lenny leaves and walks around some. Screw that Neil. Lenny should learn knots math before him. The problem is, the only person Lenny knows who knows knots math is Grace Knots, the child genius who it's named after. Lots of people try to learn knots math and can't. All the more reason to get obsessed with learning it. If he learned it, the dumbass know-it-alls, no real-life experience people who attend this school would have to give him a little respect. Two months later, Lenny finishes a chemistry exam and walks around to unwind. He steps into one of the cylinder rooms. The lights are out. Light from the 4 open doors provides the lighting. All the seats are empty. This is a good place to have a moment to think. He sits and closes his eyes, but opens them when he hears a thud, 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 coming from an upper floor. What in the... He stands and walks to the one-person elevator in the center of the room. As he rides it up, the commotion grows louder. On the top floor of the cylinder rooms, the doors are closed and all the lights are on. Roof panels removed from the ceiling rest over seats. A ladder reaches through the ceiling and a man's legs and feet stand on one of the steps of the ladder. Tools and power cords lie on the floor. A bipedal bot stands holding the ladder. The noise is piercing now. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Lenny isn't sure what he should do. A second bipedal bot takes a step toward Lenny and says, "This is a maintenance site. For your safety, leave this area." Lenny turns to push the down button. The thwacking stops and an adult climbs down the ladder. He pulls goggles off his face and says, "You there, what are you doing? Did Tara send you?" Lenny stammers. Sweat stains cover the man's shirt. His eyes and mouth twist. One eye remains shut while the other pops open. He moves rapidly. Lenny says, "I don't know, Terrace. I heard the noise you're making." The man leans back on the ladder and hacks. Spittle flies from his mouth. He says, "You're one of the smart kids. Giantess's genius kids, the makers of tomorrow. What's your name?" "Lenny." The man says, "Tell me, Lenny, what do you do at the end of the world?" Lenny says, "What?" Some inner battle in the man's mind causes him to shake his head. He says, "Don't take me seriously." Lenny stares at the man until the man fidgets. The man says, "What do you want out of life?" Lenny says, "I want to learn knots math." The man says, "Oh, you're one of those." He shakes his head again, fending off his own ill intentions. "It's supposed to be impossible for a human to learn knots math. I mean, isn't that the point? A math only AI can use because humans are too dumb?" Lenny says, "Grace Knots knows how to use it." The man says, "So she's a true exception to the rule. Are you as smart as her?" Lenny says, "Probably not." The man says, "Do you know who I am? When most people on Earth lost their jobs to these guys." He waves his hands at the two robots. "I kept my job because I'm supposed to be smart. My group worked on projects centuries ahead of their time. I gotta work with the most advanced AI." Lenny says, "You're in research and development?" The man reaches in his pocket, pulls out a bottle, shakes it so it rattles, and tosses it at Lenny. As it flies toward Lenny, he instinctively snatches it out of the air. Pills in the bottle rattle as he catches it. The bottle is wet from the man's sweat. The man says, "Those kept me on the payroll. I don't think they could help me learn knots math, but maybe they'll help you. Don't take a full pill, though. Try a quarter pill if you try it." The largest word on the label reads Nu Plus. The man says, "Now get out of here. Do me a huge favor and don't make me waste precious time explaining myself." Lenny wants to ask what the man is doing, but presses the down button. As the elevator drops, the man watches Lenny go with an intense expression that Lenny can't read. That evening, while Lenny eats in the cafeteria, a girl of 11 runs in and says, "The robots are carrying a body. Come see." Lenny jumps up to go see with the rest. The group follows her down a hall to the entrance to the cylinder lift. A stretcher bot and 2 bipedal bots walk toward them. A bot says, "Stand back, let us through." The children move to the wall. As the stretcher bot walks by, Lenny can see the body as the man he spoke with earlier. A cord is tied tight around his neck and the loose end hangs off the stretcher. Blue lines show on the man's pasty skin. That night, Lenny wakes, gasping from a nightmare in which his father came back to life and chased him down streets. In the days that follow, word spreads about the body. Some children talk about the boogeyman, that he looks for people who spend too much time alone. When Lenny's counter app says that 4.5 months have passed, kids are asking, "When is this going to be over? When can we go back to normal school?" When can I talk to Mom and Dad? Teens are demanding answers, and younger children show signs of fear such as trouble sleeping, lack of focus, and irregular appetite. The med kiosk is visited by children who complain of head and stomach aches. Word gets around that the adults are staying in the command room on the top floor and they won't let students enter. Appeals to the 3 student guardians are ignored. But overall, school goes on. One afternoon, after Lenny finishes his production simulation session in a study booth, he finds the halls are empty. Where is everyone? He walks down a few halls, looks in the cafeteria and auditorium, but sees no one. His heart begins to race. 2 floors down, he hears voices at the other end of the hall and heads toward them. Groups of kids stand outside the game room. Some enter the room and some leave and walk down the hall. Lenny asks a group of girls, "What is it?" They look at each other, smile, and walk away. A crowd forms inside the game room around the pool table. Lenny enters and presses through the crowd. Grace Knott stands on a chair by the table. Everyone watches almost silently. A bipedal bot leans over the table holding a stick, aims at the white ball, and takes a shot. The white ball knocks into 2 other balls on the table, and they all move around the surface. Lenny wants to laugh. A robot that plays pool, what's the fuss? But pieces of cardboard block the pockets. A screen on the wall shows a 2D view of the balls moving on the table surface with horizontal and vertical lines overlaid. 3 ratios show exactly where each ball moves on the table, and a number at the end must be a calculation involving all the ratios. As the balls slow, kids hop up and down, clap their hands to their mouths, and squeal. When the balls stop on what seem like random spots on the table, the number resulting from the ratios looks familiar. Most of the kids cheer. Grace says, "And there's the answer for the Druss-Wall equation." That's right, he studied that in physics. He says what he thinks out loud. What is this? Kids are asking Grace to calculate other equations. Do the Kimura equation for plasma. Do the equation for when bleats bleat in War Trumpet. Many giggle. A boy next to Lenny says, "She's running computer programs on that pool table." Lenny says, "Huh?" Grace places a 4th ball on the table. She air taps and the robot moves each ball to precise spots. The boy says, "It's the computational universe. The idea that any part of the universe can be turned into a computer, in this case, a pool table." A girl says, "One day we'll turn ordinary objects into computers. Their atoms will be like the pool balls." Lenny says, "That's nuts." He feels giddy. Grace says, "I wanted a new way to work through my physics problems." She almost seems blind the way she never looks at anything but acts like she sees everything. Maybe she has no central vision and sees everything in her peripheral. She also clucks as her head sways around. Lenny swallows a hard lump. He doesn't want to be the dullest genius in the school for geniuses anymore, but damn, Grace is friggin' a sky-high genius. How he'd like to think like her. She's only 13. He watches a few more examples, then saunters to the cafeteria to eat lunch, and begins the imitations. Kids forget that they've spent months sheltering and bust open the previously overlooked toy room and arts and crafts room to find items they can turn into computers. Most of their projects don't work because Grace's imitators don't know how to reprogram a robot to manipulate matter with exactness. A few days later, Lenny finds 2 10-year-olds have taken apart a robot in the hall. He says, "What are you doing?" One says, "We want to turn a robot into a rig." Lenny says, "Guys, we need that robot to do its job. We're living in a small ecosystem and depend on everything running well. Things could go horribly wrong if something breaks down." Lenny realizes these 2 are some of the kids who stopped doing their classes. The second says, "You're not a grown-up." The first says, "Grace hacked a robot." Lenny says, "That's a robot that'll play pool with you. Where did you get this robot?" The first says, "The cafeteria." The second says, "Why can't we get more games? We want real games." Lenny walks away. The top floor is dark and hotter than the other floors. The air feels heavy and damp. Walking down the hall, Lenny hears what he thinks are muffled animal sounds. As he nears the command room and the sound source, he recognizes the cries of a man in pain. Dirty cafeteria trays and used water bottles litter the floor. He listens at the door and only hears the man's cries. He knocks on the door. Nothing. He knocks a little louder. Something crashes on the other side of the door. A scraping sound could be the moving of furniture, and the door opens a crack. A femme with bags under bloodshot eyes looks at him through the crack. She says, "We were wondering when the kids would come around." Her speech sounds loose and dragging. He says, "Can I speak to one of the guardians? Is Miss Flecky in there?" He rears back as a man clearly cries out in pain inside the command room. Moving like she's half asleep, the femme rubs her cheek with a hand. She says, "Hold on." When she steps back from the door, Lenny tries to see inside. Lights inside a computer rack blink. Miss Flecky's face appears. Her squirrely smile seems out of character. She says, "Lenny." Lenny says, "Hello, Miss Flecky. I thought you should know that some of the kids aren't doing their schoolwork." Her smile grows as the muscles around her eyes tighten. She says, Yes." Lenny says, "It's just I'm a little worried that the kids are getting off track." She huffs a laugh and says, "Lenny, see, that isn't my job anymore." He says, "They took apart a robot." Her head leans back with condescension as she says, "Oh, they took apart a robot." He says, "A cafeteria robot." She says, "A robot from the cafeteria." A man in the room shouts, "Get back here." Lenny says, "Any word of when we can go back to the surface?" She says, "I'm going to go now. Good luck." She shuts the door. Confused, disorientated, he walks back to the elevator. That night he can't sleep, so he walks around. The halls are empty and quiet. They light up as he passes through. Cleaner bots vacuum floors and wipe down surfaces. Framed pictures on the walls that show scenic landscapes normally bathed in daylight now show those same scenes, but in darkness and moonlight. What the hell is happening with the storm? Is it local, national, global? As he wonders, it feels like the fluids drain out of his gut. An icky ache settles in. The adults are highly capable people. They are on the short list of most successful people. The school guardians have PhDs in child health and welfare. What do they know that's made them lose it? What made them give up hope and wills to fight? Lenny wants to know. He must go talk to the adults again. But not while it's late. He'll talk to them tomorrow. He'll have a look at what that man was doing at the top of the cylinder lift. He takes an elevator and walks toward the cylinder's top floor. Ahead, kids converse and laugh. Inside the cylinder, 4 popular students in the 15-year-old age range sit. One says, "Na, fi, tan." Another, acting like she sees floating objects because she's looking in AR, says no. The first says, "No, are you sure?" Lenny says, "What are you guys doing? Are you practicing knots math?" The group gets quiet and all 4 faces look at him. Lenny says, "I've been practicing knots math." A girl says, "Aren't you 17? She coughs a little. He says, "Yes." He feels his posture bending. The other girl says, "Why aren't you at space camp? You're the oldest student here." Lenny says, "Never mind." He turns and walks away. The first girl says, "Why isn't he in college? We're all going to college next year." The other girl says, "He'll still be here." Stupid clicks. Stupid clicks. 2 of those kids were nice the last few times he talked to them. What is it about clique mentality that turns nice people nasty? You can talk to me, but if I'm with my friends, don't even think about joining. Stupid. Humans are like pack animals. He digs through his things in the dark in his room, trying not to wake Neil. When his hand brushes the bottle, the pills inside rattle. He takes it with both hands wrapped around it, hoping to muffle the sound. Back out in the lit hall, he takes a breath and starts walking, reading the label. All the students know about Nuplus, though it's strictly forbidden. Twice he's heard of students getting kicked out of school for taking it. They want us to get smarter, but won't let us take a drug that makes us smarter. Where's the logic in that? Octavia appears, startling him. She says, "It's late. Your heart rate is very fast. Is something bothering you?" The way she looks at him gives him pause. He says, "I don't think you can help." She says, "Try me." He says, "Can you tell me why we're still in the shelter?" She says, "The reasons for sheltering haven't been updated." He says, "Can you try to find out?" She says, "Your guardians haven't answered my last inquiries. Normally I contact them first. Why don't you talk to me about what's going on with you?" He says, "I'm okay. I'm sure I'll be okay. Can you give me privacy?" She says, "Sure." She disappears. He takes the elevator in a hall to the cafeteria. All the lights are on, but the place is empty, even of robots. When he looks down to his lower left, the time appears, 3:40 a.m. He sits down at a table. Using a file that folds out from nail clippers, he cuts grooves in a Nuplus pill as it rests on the table. The grooves make an X. He presses the file into the grooves to first divide the pill in half and then into quarters. They say when you get on Nuplus, it's very hard to go back. He takes 3 of the pieces and puts them back in the bottle. Critics of Nuplus say the drug doesn't make you smarter, but makes you hypomanic, a cognitively aroused state in which you can make far-flung associations, but a state that endangers your health. With the file, he crushes the remaining piece. He separates one fragment from the pile of fragments and dust. Though Nuplus users are high-functioning, they're prone to heart attacks and brain aneurysms. With the file, he moves the pile of fragments off the edge of the table and into the bottle. He then presses his index finger onto the remaining fragment, lifts it, and licks the fragment off his fingertip. The taste of his mouth changes, and he feels a soreness in his jaw. He swallows and continues to swallow his saliva to wash out his mouth. Soon after Knott's math became known, someone told an AI to write lessons for humans to learn the math. With that document open in Ayara, Lenny starts from the beginning. Forget that it's math. You are learning something completely different than any other subject you've tried to learn. He feels time slowing down. Everything he knows, his model of reality, shrinks so that he knows its edges and can examine it objectively. At the same time, he finds bits of knowledge outside his former model of reality that he can now incorporate into the model. Just as his brain space is doing this, he wants to laser focus on an idea of subject. His attention is a laser beam, and he wants to aim it at a puzzle to solve. The lesson plan floating before him transforms from obscure and daunting to a puzzle begging to be solved, like the puzzles in games. If he nudges Knott's math, feeling for crannies, he knows the nut will be cracked and he'll get to the yummy morsel of truth inside. But the Knott's math is the Godzilla of all puzzles. He commits sections of it to memory, which is easier to do now. He doesn't know why each part is what it is. None of it makes sense. How it makes sense altogether, part to part, eludes him. For hours he focuses like this. Like a climber scaling a rock cliff, he feels the surface, searches for places where he might get a good hold. Studying knots is different than when he's done it before. After studying all the way through the lessons, he starts again at the beginning, saying to himself, "This is a kind of knowledge unlike any I've studied before. Don't try to link it to your experience of reality yet." Kids, mostly children, enter the cafeteria, and robots serve them breakfast on trays. He is vaguely aware that some students watch him. That's never happened before. In the 2 years he's been in the school, he's gotten used to not being noticed. Despite the growing outside activity, he finds it easier to double down on his studies. With a fervor, he shines his laser focus on the study material. A loud explosion shakes the room. Kids jump up off the tables, trays go flying. Everyone looks up at dust that falls from the lamps. The youngest begin to cry. The server bots step away from Humes, and a voice says, "Does anyone need assistance?" Lenny closes all his AR apps. They all wait for what might happen next. But nothing happens. Children consult their AI buddies. Lenny is the oldest, and the next oldest kids look as bewildered as the children. Lenny walks out of the room saying, "Octavia, tell me what you know about that explosion." Octavia appears running beside him. She says, "It was on the top floor. It's a dangerous situation. You shouldn't go there." He says, "Don't tell me what to do. I'm going there." He's aware that he reacted much faster than any other student. He's aware that just yesterday he wouldn't clearly know that it's up to him to face this danger. Getting off the elevator on the top floor along with med and stretcher bots, he steps into a littered hall filled with smoky air and red light. A layer of smoke covers the floor. An AR voice says, "Warning, clear this area, you are at risk. Take the elevator to another floor." Red lights blink off and on through the doorway to the control room. The bots go ahead of Lenny, stepping on the trash. It's hard to tell what the control room looked like before. Pieces of ceiling panels cover the floor, burned and smoking. Shattered monitors strobe. Chairs on their sides smolder. Bodies lie over tables in corners and twisted on the floor. Lenny resists the urge to run back the way he came. A femme raises her hand to him and he steps toward her, climbing over the wreckage. Her hair is singed, her skin is burned, and where it cracks, fleshy redness glistens. She chokes out, "Bomb!" Blood rubs off on his arm where she grabs him. A bot steps forward and pulls her hand off him. It says, "Step back so we can get her to the med bay." A stretcher bot marches forward and the bipedal lifts her onto it. In a glance, Lenny counts 10 people wounded in the room. More bots arrive, not just the first responder bots, but bots normally used to clean and provide maintenance. Platform bots used to move supplies are used as stretchers to carry bodies out. First responder bots begin first aid on the wounded as they take them to the elevator. Adult number 12 hung himself a while ago. One more adult isn't accounted for. Lenny goes back into the hall and checks the other rooms. He checks the entire floor but doesn't find adult 11. In the elevator, he says, "Octavia, take me to medbay." She says, "Okay, would you like me to let the Guardians know you aren't feeling well?" He says, "No." He isn't going for his own health. But she isn't wrong that he isn't feeling well. The nucleus is wearing off. That and lack of sleep is piling upon him, dragging him down. He's scared too. On the 5th floor, kids are in the hall going to breakfast in classrooms. Aren't they at all worried about the explosion? Lots of them must have heard it, but they act the same as yesterday. None of them stop to look where a bot mops blood off the hall floor. Maybe it's a good thing that all these children aren't panicking. When he enters the reception room of the medbay, Octavia appears and says, "How can I help?" He says, "I want to see the wounded." She says, "That is off limits." A medbot comes from the back and stands in the doorway. He says, "I need to speak to a guardian." She says, "About what?" He says, "I don't want to tell you. I need to speak to a guardian in confidentiality." She says, "Hold on." She tilts back and forth and twists her lips like she does when trying to solve a puzzle in a game. "You can go back." The medbot steps aside. The room is a mess. Blood spots cover stretchers, beds, the floor, and piles of bandages on the floor. Burned fumes lie in all 6 of the beds. Medbots crowd the space. They leave 3 of the bodies alone, and those bodies remain stone-cold still. He recognizes Miss Flecky as robot arms and equipment from the walls tend to her wounds. He walks up to her and says, "Hello? Are you awake?" Her head remains still, but her eyes roll to look at him. Her hands flutter as she air types. A message appears in his ARA, and he air taps it. It says, "Lenny." He says, "You were in an explosion. Everyone in the control room." Her next message says, "Yes." He says, "Can you tell me what's happening? How can I keep the school safe?" She air types longer this time. Her message says, "Look in control room. There's a hard copy instructions. Has codes for taking control." He says, "What caused the explosion?" Her message says, "Hopeless. The battery is running out." A robot comes in carrying the helmet-like contraption Lenny saw when they took the lift to the shelter, the device its owner called the Iron Maiden. The bot lifts the man's top half off the bed and fits the device over his head. The device and the body shift as the device tightens around the man's neck. The bot lets the body drop and steps back. Lenny jumps when the device vibrates and makes slicing sounds. It causes the body to shift back and forth as the machines inside go to work. The bot that brought the device walks out of the room. The robots did a thorough job of cleaning the top floor. Broken pieces and burned items were removed. An air purifier pulled all the smoke and soot out of the air. Surfaces were scrubbed. What remains are cracked monitors on the walls, scratched desks, and neat piles of personal and non-personal items intermixed. Lenny rummages through desk drawers and lockers. The silence is broken by footsteps coming down the hall. With a pang of fear, he steps out of a server closet to see who it is. Grace Knotts, as small and stiff as an Emma doll bot, stands in the center of the room. Her AR glasses look comically giant on her face. She seems to look past him as she loudly says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm looking for the codebook for the control room." She says, "Did you cause the explosion?" He says, "No. Right now, no one is overseeing the school's safety. I want to find out what's happening up there." He glances up. She says, "I'm worried things are falling apart." Together, they search, scattering the neat piles the bots made. After going through one pile on a table, Lenny feels under the table. His hand bumps up against something. He pulls at it. With a ripping sound, he pulls a binder off the undersurface it was taped to. He pulls the tape off the binder. He says, "Grace, I think I found it." They stand side by side, looking through the binder as it rests on the table. The pages are thick composites imprinted with large font words, simple maps, and diagrams. She says, "This shelter is designed to keep people in. So the man who hung himself was trying to get out but couldn't get past the first barrier here." On the 5th page, they find control center login codes. The process of logging in requires air tapping to enter long passwords, 20 passwords in all. They get pop-ups that say, "Warning, to proceed you must revoke your status of protected shelter citizen. You may be called upon to do things that put your life in danger." Lenny watches Grace nervously as she agrees to the pop-up without hesitating. Once they've both entered all the passwords, they receive a new app. When they tap on it, augmented reality items pin themselves to different areas of the room. They search through menus. Lenny finds emergency communication channels. On one, a dispassionate AI voice says, "The storm has affected every part of the globe. All cities are destroyed. There is little doubt that most have died. It's impossible to know who's still alive. Most lines of communication are broken." Grace says, "I found a list of above-ground cams. All the monitors in here are broken. You'll have to get to a cam feed on your own." Lenny says, "What's the menu tree? Half the cams don't work." As they find feeds showing the outside world both slump, then sit on the ground, curling in on themselves. The storm rages. It has flattened and torn apart the world they knew. Tops of buildings are gone. Layers of broken everything covers the ground. Millions of broken everything else flies through the air. Grace finds a feed that causes her to run for the exit, but she vomits before she reaches the door. Lenny runs to her and says, "You're too young to do this. You should let me take care of things." He finds a shirt and brings it to her. After she wipes her mouth with the shirt, she says, "No, you need help. Where is your family?" She drops the shirt and stands upright. He says, "I have a brother." She interrupts him. "We can't do what the adults did. We can't lose our objective to keep the citizens alive." Lenny guesses that Grace's parent or parents must have been in some kind of emergency services and that she borrows the words she's heard them say.
Thank you for listening. Please take the time to rate, review, and subscribe so that more future-minded people can find this show. My landing page is in 20xx.com. There, you can find the companion website to this podcast that includes an illustrated timeline and glossary.